If you have eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, or acne, you're not alone. Eczema increased 40% over the past 4 years, and incidences of adult acne are up 200% in the last year alone. This qualifies as an epidemic, and I don't need to tell you, if you're struggling with these things, that there's not a lot that works. Steroid creams are not effective. Antibiotics only make things worse over time. My name is Shann Nix Jones, and I'm not a doctor and I'm not a scientist. I'm a wife and a mother, and I went looking for answers for my own family when the doctors couldn't help us. Along the way, I found some extraordinary things, some common sense and some uncommon science, and I'd like to share those with you today. Over the next 15 minutes or so, I'd like to tell you the things that I discovered that can help you clear your own skin. And the most important thing that I'd like you to take away today is that eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, and acne are not skin conditions. They are autoimmune conditions, and they sit in your gut. What that means for you is that you're going to have to heal your gut in order to heal your skin. The good news is that we figured out a way to make this happen, and we call this the Good Skin Solution. So I'm going to talk you through the things I've discovered and the ways that you can apply the Good Skin Solution to your own skin condition. My outcome for you is that you become an expert of your own wellness, and that by the end of this little talk, you understand some things about the way your own system works so that you can go out and heal your skin. So my story really begins when I was 41 and I met a man named Rich, who was a Welsh farmer. It was a little bit of a Crocodile Dundee story. I was a journalist, he was a Welsh farmer. We fell in love and he invited me to come and live as his wife with my 2 children, Benji and Jolie, to live with him and his 2 daughters, Caris and Ellie, and his father and his daughter's boyfriend on this beautiful farm in Wales with hills that slope down to the Irish Sea. It was gorgeous. It was also very challenging. It was a self-sustaining farm. And so I found myself going from being a city girl who couldn't boil an egg to making bread and making beer and making soap and making cheese. If you'd like to read more about my adventures of getting used to the farm, you can do that in my first book, which is called Secrets from Chuckling Goat. I loved being on the farm. And I found that all of the cooking and all of the traditional tasks that women had done for thousands of years were really deeply satisfying to me. And one of the most wonderful things was that I found that I could heal my family with food, that my place in the kitchen meant that I could either move them toward wellness or tip them toward illness with the food that I gave them every day. My little boy Benji around this time started getting horrible chest infections. He would get a cold, it would settle in his chest, and he would go to the doctor. We'd give him antibiotics, and then 3 months later he'd get sick again. Back to the doctor, more antibiotics, and we would circle with this round and round. I knew that he was far too little to have so many antibiotics, and so I asked Rich what he thought we should do. And he said, get a goat. And I said, why? I just told you my son is sick and you said get a goat. It's in the Welsh tradition that goat's milk is very good for bronchial infections and skin conditions. Okay, so we got a goat. We got a beautiful goat named Bithig. She was a gorgeous black and white goat. She had long floppy ears. And I learned to milk Bithig, and we gave Benji the goat's milk, and it actually cleared his bronchial infections, and he stopped having to go to the doctor, which was a wonderful result. Then we had a lot of milk left over, and I didn't know what to do with it. I didn't want to make cheese because everybody made cheese. Around this time, I discovered the work of Dr. Natasha Campbell McBride. Dr. Natasha is Russian, and she knew about something called kefir, because they drink a lot of kefir in Russia. They use it to keep themselves healthy. I learned that kefir is a powerful Eastern European probiotic. It's a lot like a drinking yogurt, but it's much, much more powerful. Yogurt has transient bacteria that's killed off in the digestive process, and kefir is actually so powerful. It has non-transient bacteria that survive the digestive process and actually repopulate your gut with all the good bacteria they need. So Dr. Natasha was giving kefir to her patients and getting great results. So I thought, great, we'll make kefir with this goat's milk. I also learned from Dr. Natasha's book, The Gut and Psychology Syndrome, that inside your gut are 2 kilograms of bacteria. That's a lot. That's like 2 bunches of bananas in terms of weight. And those bacteria are living and thriving in their own ecosystem. The easiest way to imagine it is like Yellowstone National Park in there. There's wolves and elk and beaver and trees and flowers and birds and bugs, all existing in this wonderful ecosystem, which, like any ecosystem, is fragile and it can be damaged. Because Rich and I had met so late in life, we decided that we wanted to start a business together so that we could be together and I wouldn't have to travel anymore. So we started a little business called Chuckling Goat in honor of the goat Bithig, because it always seemed like she was laughing. And we started to sell the kefir that we were making. Everything was sunny on the farm and we were really enjoying life. Then suddenly, Rich was stricken ill. He was ill with colitis, which he'd had for some time, but he had a really bad attack and he went into the hospital. While they were there, they removed his entire large intestine and he came out with a 10-inch incision down the middle of his abdomen. He also came out, as we know now, with an infection. It was a superbug infection called MRSA, which is methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus. What that means is it doesn't respond to antibiotics. There's nothing they can do about it. And the way it looked was, every day when we took the bandage off to redress his wounds, instead of healing, there were little holes in the wound, and they were getting deeper and deeper every day. The nurse was actually measuring them with a little probe and a ruler. So they scraped it and they sent the swab off, and it came back that he was positive for MRSA. The nurse couldn't help us, and the doctor couldn't help us, and the surgeon couldn't help us. And I had to face the reality that the moment that those holes hit his internal organs, our happy ending here was over. That wasn't okay with me. I decided I hadn't come that far and worked that hard to find that man, to have that be the way that my happy ending ended. And so I started to research. I started to look for things that I could do. And one thing I noticed as I started to read about this infection was how very aggressive all the language was. All the medical terminology was about fighting infection and killing the bacteria and destroying the bugs. And I thought, this is aggressive. This is wrong. In fact, this has to be the wrong question. I'm just that stubborn because my family's from Texas. So I thought, right, if I'm getting an answer that I don't like to the question of how can I kill the infection, then I'm asking the wrong question. I need to ask a different question. What question can I ask? What's a better question? And what I decided was, a better question was, how can I bring the MRSA into balance? MRSA is all over our bodies all the time. You have it on you right now. It's just that it's being kept in balance in your ecosystem. And in Rich's body, it was out of balance. Once I asked that question, I could start to see some answers. I knew one thing that actually brought natural ecosystems back into balance, and it was the kefir that we were making right there on the farm. The wonderful thing that the kefir does inside your gut is it repopulates your gut with all of the positive bacteria that you need. And I thought there just might be an outside chance that it worked the same way on the skin. I didn't know. There was no research. Nobody had ever used kefir on the skin. But at this point, Rich was fading in and out of consciousness. He was getting sicker by the day, and I knew I didn't have much time. So I thought, I'm going to try. I don't have anything to lose, and it might help. I did some more research, and I came up with a combination of essential oils that I thought might work to knock back the MRSA a little bit. And I wiped Rich down with that. And then I put the kefir onto his skin. Now, I did not put it directly on his wound. I wasn't that brave, because I thought if that causes even more of a problem, that's going to be my fault. But I did put it all over his body. So I washed him down with the essential oils, and then I put the kefir on him. And I did that every day for 3 days. And every day for 3 days, he got sicker, and the nurse came, and the nurse went, and things weren't looking good. Then finally, on the 4th day, the nurse peeled back the bandage, and we all looked, and in fact, the holes seemed smaller. She didn't say anything, I didn't say anything, but the next day she came back, checked again, and for sure, the holes were really smaller this time. So they started to clear. They started to heal quite rapidly then. It was like sun on a puddle. They just started to dissolve. And she took another swab, sent it off to the lab, and sure enough, Rich was completely clear of MRSA. 2 weeks later, he got up out of bed, got back on his tractor, and he's completely well. And he's been completely well to this day. So, my own private miracle. But once the dust had settled and we knew that he was all right, I sent things off to the lab. I wanted to find out, was I just making this up? Was I just lucky? We sent the essential oil combination that I had come up with off to the lab, and we found that, in fact, it was effective against MRSA. It also is effective against E. coli, Campylobacter, and Salmonella. But the real important thing there was the kefir. We went to Aberystwyth University, and they tested the kefir, and they found that, in fact, it is powerful, and it is safe, and it does repopulate the bugs, not only inside the gut, but also on the skin. It's so powerful, in fact, that you can dry it, you can freeze it, and you can put it into lotions, which is what I began to do. I went to learn how to make handmade soaps and lotions with the kefir in it, and we began to sell those in our business, Chuckling Goat. So you remember my son Benji had been to the doctor and had loads and loads of antibiotics. Well, he then had eczema, which, as we're going to discover, was connected. So I started putting the kefir lotions that I had made on Benji's skin and started washing him with the kefir cleanser that I had made and giving him the kefir to drink, and his eczema disappeared. Another amazing result. So again, I wanted to know why this was happening. It was great that it had happened, but I needed to know the science behind it. So I went looking for the science, and I found some amazing science. January 2015, the scientists discovered that eczema is not a skin condition. It's an autoimmune disorder. And autoimmune disorders sit in your gut. Your skin is just a map of your gut. And so in order to heal your skin, you have to heal the gut. And that's what the kefir does. And that's what it did for Benji. To understand this more clearly, let me tell you a little story. In the United States, in Wyoming, there was an area of such outstanding natural beauty that the people there decided that they really needed to set it aside as a park so it would stay unspoiled for everyone to enjoy. It's called Yellowstone. And in 1872, they made it a park. The only problem with Yellowstone was that there were wolves, and wolves are predators, and wolves are dangerous. So they decided that they would go in and kill off all the wolves, and they invited everyone who wanted to hunt to come and kill the wolves, and that's what they did. They chased them in helicopters until they were exhausted, and they killed them all off. By 1927, there were no wolves left in Yellowstone. The problem with that was that the wolves were keeping the elk population down. And once the wolves were gone, the elk went crazy and they started overgrazing the willow. And once the willow trees were gone, the beaver, which were using the willow for their dams, began to die off. And when the beaver weren't making dams anymore, there were no nice still pools for the fish. So the fish died. And then the birds that ate the fish died, and then the seeds that came from the plants that the birds would spread around started to die, and Yellowstone began to turn into an absolute desert. They realized what was happening, and human beings went in and tried to cull the elk to keep it under control, but it didn't work. Human beings don't hunt elk the same way that wolves do. They managed to stop the damage, but they didn't manage to bring Yellowstone back into its original beauty. In 1995, then, they took the decision to put the wolves back into Yellowstone. An amazing decision, and as you can imagine, there was a lot of controversy, but they did that. And guess what happened? The wolves began to cull the elk stopped overgrazing the willow, the beaver came back because the willow came back, because the beavers were making dams, the fish began to come back, and the birds came back, and the plants came back, and the seeds came back, and even the microbes in the soil came back. Yellowstone was rewilded, and it began to bloom again. Now, that's a metaphor, but that's what kefir does inside your microbiome. Inside your gut, just like in Yellowstone, all of these living organisms are competing and fighting and eating each other and cooperating in this massive ecosystem. And that ecosystem gets destroyed by our modern life. Your microbiome is damaged by sugar, stress, antibiotics, and environmental toxins. The environmental toxins that you find in personal care products. The average woman uses 515 chemicals by the time she leaves the bathroom in the morning. And also the things that you use commonly to clean the house. These things wipe out your microbiome the same way that pouring bleach into a river will kill the fish. Our modern lifestyles are wiping out our microbiomes, and that microbiome damage is what maps onto your skin. When you have eczema, psoriasis, rosacea, or acne, It is just a map of what's happening inside your gut. And in order to resolve that problem, you put the kefir in the gut and the kefir on the skin, and it rewilds your system the same way that putting the wolves back in Yellowstone rewilded the park. You need to stop the industrialization of your microbiome and put the good bugs back in there, and that's what kefir does. So what does my story and the wolves in Yellowstone have to do with you? Well, we call this combination of putting kefir inside the gut to heal the gut and putting kefir on the skin to heal the skin, the good skin solution. And the science behind the way all of that works is in my new book, The Good Skin Solution. I'd like to show you now some pictures of some clients who have used the Good Skin Solution. We've been working with them over time, and these are the results that they've achieved. As we began to work with these clients over time, we found that there were actually dietary changes that they needed to make in order to help the kefir do its job. Kefir is not a drug. It is a way of reseeding your gut with the good bacteria that it needs to rewild that beautiful ecosystem inside there. But there are some suggestions that I do have that you can make to help support the action of the kefir inside your system. The first one is bone broth. This is an amazing thing that you can add to your diet. Bone broth has bioavailable collagen, which is what your gut needs to heal, and it's fantastic for your skin as well. I suggest that you drink at least 8 ounces of bone broth every day. The second suggestion is to substitute stevia instead of sugar. Sugar is one of the things that really kills the microbiome. It damages all of those little organisms in there. And so I suggest stevia because it is a plant-based, completely natural sweetener. It's actually not a sweetener at all. It just stimulates the sweet part of your tongue, and it does not harm your microbiome. So that's a great thing to switch to. It's great for weight loss as well. My third suggestion is that you use goat dairy instead of cow dairy. Cow dairy is incredibly allergic for human beings. It's estimated that up to 60% of adults are actually allergic to cow's milk without realizing it, and it's definitely a trigger for autoimmune conditions and eczema. So no cow's milk, no cow butter, no cow cheese. You can have goat's milk, goat butter, and goat cheese, which are all delicious. The fourth suggestion is to eat low GI foods. What this means is that you want to eat foods that burn slowly inside your system. So if you think of your system as a fireplace and you're going to make a fire, if you burn newspaper only, it's going to flare and then it's going to die down. And that causes a huge surge of insulin, which is going to disrupt your microbiome and damage all those precious little organisms inside there. So instead, you want to eat low GI foods that burn slowly over time, like wood. So that would be instead of bread, rice, pasta, white potatoes, all of which burn very quickly inside your system, things like oatmeal, lentil, chickpeas, quinoa, amaranth, these things all burn very slowly inside your system. And here's an important one as well. Fruit and veg is great, and the more of it you eat, the better, but don't juice it. You don't want to reserve the pulp and get rid of it. The pulp helps burn the fructose inside your system more slowly. So eat either a whole fruit or blend it up. Blitz it, don't juice it. The last suggestion I have is to eat good fats. This is really important. We've all been told for such a long time fats are bad. Certain types of fats are good, and they're also very important for your system. So things like coconut oil, walnuts, avocado, salmon, flaxseed oil, all these things give your body the equipment that it needs to help heal your skin. And the last suggestion of the Good Skin Solution is get outside. Not only is vitamin D really, really great for eczema, but you need all of those good bugs that we grew up with. When we were cavemen out there, all of those bacteria in our system came from the living world around us. And it's important that you get back in contact with that. Get your hands into the dirt. Pet animals, take the kids to the farm. It's being back in the outside world that is going to undo the damage that industrialization has done to your microbiome. So before we finish, I'd like to leave you with a little story, because sometimes people ask me, do I have to give up everything? Do I have to eat perfectly? Do I have to behave myself all the time? So Benji, who now has no skin condition anymore, all the eczema is gone, no bronchial infections, no inhalers, he said, "Can I have a sleepover?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Will you promise not to be all stressy and bossy?" Yes. "And can we have lots of things that damage the microbiome?" His words, like crisps and chocolate. I said, "Yes." And he said, "And can I have 2 kefirs beforehand and 2 kefirs afterwards?" And I said, "You know what? My job here is done." He has learned the principle, which is maintain your ecosystem. Take care of that precious, fragile group of organisms inside there. Modern life does damage to your system. Repair the damage, because keep in mind that you are a holobiont. That's the word the scientists have come up with to describe the fact that you are a collection, a constellation of all these wonderful life forms. You have as many bugs inside your gut as there are stars in our observable universe. So you are an area of outstanding natural beauty, and make sure to keep that area wild. Thank you.